Hello, it's Lexi at Cozy Tea Cafe over on Bookstagram, and today I'm going to be summarizing Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo, book 2 in the Six of Crows duology, or so we thought, because she's actually coming out with another book at the end of June. So as a reminder, this summary will be full of spoilers. If you have not read Crooked Kingdom and you don't want anything spoiled, don't continue watching. So we start off immediately following the events of Six of Crows in this book. The Crows are attempting to pull off a scheme at the gambling den in order to get information that will save Inej. Each of the Crows are doing their own part in the scheme, and Wylan is still tailored to look like Kuwei. Jesper is gambling with Cornelius Smeet, the man they're attempting to get information out of, and Nina and Matthias are tasked with keeping him playing until after midnight, while Wylan and Kaz sneak away to find where Van Eck is keeping his wife Alice and Inej. Kaz and Wylan find properties in Van Eck's, Alice's, and Wylan's name, and Kaz thinks he knows where Inej is being kept. When they leave Smeet's office with the information they need, they run right into Smeet, but he doesn't recognize them. As the Crows go over their next steps, we learn that Kaz never intended for Kuwei to go to Ravka. He just asked Pekka to get in contact with the Ravkan capital to throw him off. Kuwei and the Grisha will hide out in the southern colonies when they're finished, but Kuwei wants to go to Ravka so he can work with the other Grisha to find an antidote to Dirta Parem. So also just a little FYI here because it confused me the first time I read. So the Dregs are the gang that they're a part of, and the Crows are like a small subset of the Dregs that Kaz runs. So when we're talking about Dregs, we're talking about the larger organization. So the Dregs member named Muzzin that was swapped out with Matthias in the Hellgate prison was found dead after a Fjerdan hitman killed him, thinking it was Matthias. So now Matthias is presumed dead to the rest of the world, and he feels extremely guilty. Then we find out that Wylan and Jesper like each other. Inej is still captured, and she escapes through a vent shaft only to be apprehended by Van Eck. He's about to shatter her legs with a mallet as punishment, but Inej tells him that Kaz won't trade for her if she's useless to him. Jesper's dad, Colm, shows up at his university after the bank threatened to take his farm away if the school loan wasn't paid, and the Crows realize that this is probably a plot to weaken them. They concoct a story to ease Colm's worries and tell him that his farm will be safe soon. Van Eck sets a trap for Kaz, thinking he'll jump at the chance to save Inej, but Kaz knows better and kidnaps his pregnant wife Alice, then leaves a note telling him to bring Inej at noon the next day. They meet Van Eck and trade Inej for Alice, but Van Eck calls the Stadwatch, which is Ketterdam's police force. There's a parade going on, so the Crows are able to escape, but then a side of the White Rose Pleasure House is blown up, which was not part of their plan. The people who blew up the White Rose are looking for Grisha, specifically Nina, and a Dirta Parem Grisha corners Nina in an alley, but Nina is able to kill her and escape. Kaz tells the crew he used the money from Pekka Rollins to invest in sugar shares that are not controlled by Van Eck silos. He plans on putting a chemical weevil into the Van Eck silos to destroy the sugar crop and make their own shares skyrocket, getting them back the 30 million Kruga that they lost after Van Eck's betrayal. Kaz also reveals that he used Alice Van Eck's name to invest in the competitor silos, so when his shareholders find out about the weevil, they'll blame Van Eck for tampering with the markets to get rich, then he'll be put in jail and barred from trading in Ketterdam. They first have to find a way into the silos, and Kaz can't pick the lock because it's too complicated, so Inej will scale one silo, add in the weevil from the top, then walk along a rope to the next, add in the next weevil vial, and so on. Nina and Matthias head to the Ravkan embassy in disguise to meet with the Grisha to develop a plan to get them out of Ketterdam on one of Van Eck's ships. They give a secret code at the entrance, and they think it's a trap when they have guns pulled on them, but then Nina sees Zoya and Genya, and they agree to her plan. After all of this, Nina and Matthias finally kiss. Wylan recounts leaving home after his father sent him away permanently to attend a music school, but on the boat, one of his father's employees tried to have him killed. He escaped and ended up in the barrel, hoping to lay low, but then his father's letters started arriving. When snooping through Smeat's office, Kaz found donations to a church in Van Eck's name and believes this is where Wyland's mother is buried. Wyland and Jesper go to the church to visit her grave, and they discover it's an asylum, not a church, and his mother is really alive. Van Eck had Wyland's mother committed to the asylum in order to seize her properties and file for a divorce. The Crows plan for their escape to Ravka, and they see wanted posters out for all of them. Jesper decides to stay back with his father to ensure his safety, even though the Crows offered to bring his father with them, and it's assumed that he wants to stay back because he's ashamed of being Grisha. Wyland also says he's staying because he won't let his father run him out of the city again, and he also has a budding connection with Jesper, but they don't explicitly say that this is a reason for him staying. Jesper recounts his childhood in Novia Zem with his father and his Grisha mother. His mom died after a poisoned young girl was brought to their door, and his mom drew the poison out of her, but then absorbed too much of the poison into her own body, and she died. Nina and Inej get to the silos, and Nina stays below to be the lookout while Inej scales the first silo, and she's pushed into one of the silos by an assassin hired by Pekka Rollins. Kaz and Wyland go to Van Eck's house and break into his safe using acid to steal his wax seal, but Pekka Rollins shows up and corners him. They're able to escape by using the acid to melt the floorboards. Back at the tomb they all use as a meeting place, Jesper, Matthias, and Kuwei talk about a possible cure to Jirda Parem by using balm that's produced from Jirda stalks, which is an old remedy that Jesper's mom used to counteract the effects of inhaling Jirda pollen back in Novia Zem. They're interrupted when Pekka Rollins' gang of Dime Lions shows up and ambushes the tomb. Inej fights the assassin and escapes using the tightrope between silos, but the assassin cuts it and Inej falls. Meanwhile, down below, Nina is being attacked by Dime Lions, and since she survived the Jirda Parem withdrawals, she has this new power that kind of counteracts her old power. So she was a heartrender, and now the opposite power is dealing with the dead. So she reaches into this new power and summons an army of corpses, and the Dime Lions retreat. She sees Inej falling and summons the corpses to catch her with the net they set up. Then the assassin comes down and flees after seeing the corpse army. We see a backstory of how Wyland ended up as a member of the Dregs. He was working at the mill and suggested an improvement using chemistry because he's their resident chemist and demolition expert. And Kaz caught on and hired him as the demolition expert. But the whole time Kaz knew he was a Van Eck and wanted him in his crew in case they needed him. The Crows come back together and see that the rest of the Dregs have turned on them, and the Stadwatch is after them, leaving them with no way out of Ketterdam. Kaz says he'll take the fall and say that he killed Wyland so everyone else can be free, but Jesper and Kaz get into a fist fight and Colm has to break it up. Then Kaz says that he has a plan. Kaz suggests they let Kuwei put himself up for auction, knowing that Kirch take their trading laws very seriously, and it would give Kuwei the protection of both the Stadwatch and the Council of Tides, which is this ominous, mysterious entity that nobody knows the true identities of. Kaz will then control the bidding and ensure Ravka gets him, since Van Eck blocked the harbor, and outsiders won't be able to make it into Ketterdam for the auction. Matthias receives Druskelet intel, and they find out that the assassin is Dunyasha, the White Blade, a Ravkan that claims to have Lansoff blood, making her a contender for the Ravkan throne, but she's completely unhinged. Nina says Ravka won't be able to win Kuwait in a bid because the country is broke, but Kaz says the Kirch Council will inadvertently bankroll them by greedily investing in Jirda, knowing that when the secret of Jirda Parem gets out, their stocks will go up and they'll be rich. These investments will be fake and the money won't go to Jirda, it'll go to Ravka. Since Colm is a Jirda farmer, he'll approach the council and offer them the investments. Later, Jesper kisses Kuwei thinking it's Wyland, and then Wyland walks in and sees and thinks something's going on between them. But later, Jesper tells Wyland that he thought it was him. Kaz tells Inej that he has an escape plan for her if things go badly, and they have a moment, but it doesn't end up going anywhere because Kaz has these issues with physical touch because of his trauma. Kaz goes to the Slat, which is the Dregs headquarters, and confronts Per Haskell in front of all of the Dregs after they turned on him and the Crows. And Per Haskell is the leader of the Dregs. So there is a huge brawl, and Kaz ends up badly injured, and a few of the Dregs are killed, but Kaz makes a big speech about following him as their leader instead of Haskell. Kaz says that Haskell doesn't do the hard work, he just reaps the benefits, and trusts the word of their rivals, the Dime Lions, instead of the word of one of his own. And just a reminder, this whole issue between the Dregs and the Crows started because the Dime Lions told Per Haskell a lie about Kaz, and that's why they all turned on him. So all of the Dregs then turn on Haskell and support Kaz. Wylan and Jesper meet with the Grisha to discuss the planned trade, and they meet Sturmhahn from Shadow and Bone. And Genya finally tailors Wylan back to looking like himself. Colm creates an alias and meets with Van Eck and the council to discuss investing in Jurda, and they take the bait. While one of the Dregs is escorting Wylan and Colm out of their hotel to get Colm out of the city, they're apprehended by Van Eck and the Dime Lions, and they beat Wylan until he tells them everything. The auction starts, but the Council of Tides stops it and announces that the auction is a sham. Van Eck is smug, thinking Kaz got caught, but the Tides reveal that the shoes were given money through a deal made between Colm's alias and Van Eck and the Merchant Council. Van Eck denies this, saying they placed their money in a stock for Jurda, but there's no evidence or proof. Wylan shows up after he was kidnapped by Dime Lions, and Van Eck orders him to tell everyone the information he revealed after being beaten, but Kaz reveals that the men who kidnapped Wylan were just Dregs members disguised as Dime Lions, and Wylan never gave them any real information because it was all an act to fool Van Eck. Van Eck then blames Kaz, but Kaz is able to disprove all of his statements, and Van Eck ends up just discrediting himself and disgraced. Then plague bells start to ring, and everyone goes into a frenzy. We find out that Nina used her new necromancer abilities to fake a plague in various gambling halls owned by Pekka Rollins throughout the city, thus activating the alarms and putting the city on a lockdown as chaos ensues. Then Dunyasha shows up to finish her assassination attempt on Inej, and Inej is winning the fight, so the White Blade admits defeat and thanks Inej for a fair fight, then uses Inej's confusion as a distraction to blow powder in her face and temporarily blind her. Inej knows the city like the back of her hand, so she leaps across building rooftops blind and eventually pushes the White Blade off, where she dies on impact. Jesper and Nina meet up to shoot Kuei with a fake bullet, but they can't get to the meeting point. Jesper finally arrives and makes the shot and uses his Grisha abilities to curve the bullet around the corner. Kaz is next to Kuei and triggers a packet of blood and bone bits to spray out as Kaz injects him with a syringe of something to make his pulse appear non-existent. Pekka and the Dime Lions corner Kaz, and he confronts Pekka about what he did 7 years ago to cause his brother's death. He throws Pekka a stuffed lion, one of his son's toys. Pekka has kept his son a secret in order to protect him, and Kaz threatens that his son will die if he kills him or the crows. He tells Pekka that his son is buried alive, and he'll tell him the location if he says his brother's name. Pekka can't remember his name, and he begs on his knees in front of the Dime Lions, and Kaz knows that he'll lose his credibility after this. Kaz finally tells him the location, but reveals to Inej that it was all a bluff. He's never even seen Pekka's son, he just took a guess. Kaz says that people will see Pekka leaving the city with a medic and blame him for causing the outbreak because they all came from his gambling halls. Pekka will be quarantined for weeks or months, and with him gone, no one will be able to back up Van Eck's claims. Pekka's businesses will shut down, and he'll lose at least a year's worth of earnings, and Inej says that Kaz showed him mercy. Meanwhile, Matthias, a medic, and Stadwatch officers are escorting Kuei's body to a boat bound for the hospital. Nina shows up with a fake pregnant belly, saying she needs to get to the hospital ASAP, and since there isn't enough room for everyone on the boat, the Stadwatch officers stay behind, and they're relieved to be away from the hospital during this supposed plague. As they pass by another boat under a bridge, Kuei's body is swapped with the body they got from a morgue the night before, and Genya tailored the corpse's face to look like Kuei. When they get to the hospital, a nurse scolds them for bringing a dead body to the hospital during a plague lockdown and tells them to put it out back while Kaz and the Grisha revive the real Kuei. After everyone disperses, a Druskella approaches Matthias and accuses him of treason. Matthias tries to reason with him, but then there's a shot. After Matthias finds Nina and kisses her, then he collapses and she sees the bullet hole in his stomach. She screams for help, but no one is around and he dies. Van Eck is arrested and all of his assets are willed to Wylan based on a fake will the Crows put in Van Eck's safe. Kaz says that he funneled money to the shoe for the auction setup and says that left over they'll each get their $4 million, $30 million total that they were originally promised from Van Eck. Nina will get Matthias' share and the dregs that stayed loyal to Kaz will get Per Haskell's share. The Grisha escape to Ravka on a sick boat and Nina has Matthias' body so she can bury him in Fjerda. Wylan and Jesper stay back to take care of the Van Eck house, and Kaz reveals that the Tide Council from the auction were really just Grisha in disguise because no one knows their true identities. After some time has passed, Inej, who's been staying with Wylan, meets with Kaz and he shows her a boat named the Wraith, which is his gift to her so she can leave to hunt slavers like she's always wanted to. Then he points to Sturmhond's ship next to hers, and she sees her family walking off, who she hasn't seen since she was sold into slavery as a little girl. Kaz called in a favor from Sturmhond, who sent out scouts to find them. Then the book ends by Inej asking Kaz to come with her to meet her family. And that's a wrap. As always, if there are any other books you would like me to summarize, just leave me a comment, and thank you for watching.